Hello everyone, my name is Fahim Ashhab and the topic of my research for the course Leadership Theories and Practice is Servant Leadership Theory in Developing Organizational Behavior. I will be studying how it helps our associates in overcoming the gender bias. Alright, so here's my presentation outline. I will be starting introducing the basic ingredients or topics or factors that is associating or that helps to analyze the gender bias, the components of gender, how they're working in this field, how they have overcame such deficits over time, and then I will go in the service leadership theory and its overview in this research. Then here comes the literature review. My research is mostly basically based upon the quantitative part, on the ingredients I have used, on the factors I have used, but there's a huge part where I've studied based mostly on the literature review, like how qualitatively they have changed and they have evolved over time, like from nurturing to demanding, something like that. So first, I will study the relationship between service leadership and gender. Then I will analyze how the overview of the literature gap has changed. Then comes the research statement and my hypothesis for this research study, and hence I go into the methodologies, how I have distributed the balance between male and female employees and employers, how they have participated in the study, what are the social media uh, factors or parameters I have discussed while studying them, and finally the results of this study. So uh, while I was studying this topic of gender gap, interestingly I found some really good points for future scopes of research. So I will be discussing those at the end of my presentation. Gender bias in leadership puts women in a difficult position compared to men. As I mean, not just the developed countries, they have overcame this gap. The developing countries are also overcoming this gap between male and female identification and their position and how they are expected to perform in the workplace. But the thing is, no matter how much we have came forward or progressed over time, there is a huge still there lies a huge gap between their leadership structure, leadership expectations, and leadership goals, and how their I mean the business world, business surface of the business world interprets them. So around the world and USA, there is only a handful of women in leadership positions, irrespective of the nature of the industry, whether it's the manufacturing or the industrial sector or literature or education, academia, everywhere it has been vividly portrayed that they are kind of still somewhat lagging behind. In the USA, there are fewer women in leadership positions than there are men named John. To be honest, it was really frustrating and at the same time very a point for thinking that still we are this much behind in just on simple retrospective. Leadership style differences between men and women has been the center of the argument for many decades. It has been studied, it has been analyzed, it has been talked about a lot these days, but still we're facing these difficulties in the differences. Their stereotypical assumptions about women that they put in more heart than brains has put them in position where they often face prejudice and resistance when it comes to attending leadership roles. It is more prevalent in developing countries than in the developed ones, as the developing countries are still bound, or I mean, to some extent, they are succumbed by their cultural or um, socio-economic difficulties and backdrops, so they face it a little bit more than developed ones. If women adopt leadership styles that are expected from their male counterparts, they are often labeled as bully and unpleasant. Well, this is what it is. It still is highly prevalent in developing ones. What is servant leadership? Servant leadership theory was considered as a gender-neutral leadership style. The paradigmic shift in leadership styles drew attention towards servant leadership. Servant leadership style is expected to improve women's position as leaders by de-emphasizing the masculine traits traditionally expected of leaders. However, it was portrayed or expected in such a manner that it should improve women's position, and also it will negate the masculinity traits which has been prevalent, which has been occurring um, in our so-called activities and participation, but it hasn't been very much uh, powerful to remove entirely the so-called uh, things that we used to face or we used to encounter, but it is improving and it is overcoming a lot over time. Although the concept is still debatable, whether servant leadership minimizes gender bias, as both servant and leader are gender-laden terms, creating paradox similar to female leader paradox. I will discuss the female leader paradox later on with the methodologies. Leadership consultants. With the advancement of technology and more human-oriented organizational culture, the need to transform a manager into an effective leader by developing certain skills and techniques. Leadership development program has become an integral part of organizational culture. The need to transform is a very important point to note, because whether there is a employee part where a lot of them are female, there needs to be a leader which is more um, focused on attention to their peers or their followers, so that they can hear them out, they can understand and acknowledge their problems and how they're facing those problems, how they can overcome them, to attend them. So the need to transform is very important in training a manager, whether he or she is a female or male. Leadership consultants serve an essential role here. They provide insightful evaluation and clarification of dexterity needed for an effective leader to individuals and to organizations. Consultants serve a very important role. Well, however, it has been more obvious that the developed countries has been successfully employing leadership consultants to train and to engage their managers in a more practical way to uh, improve themselves and improve their workforce. But the evaluation and insight which has been gained from this practice, from these studies, from these um, work ethics, it has been very ideal for to build an effective leader, to build their efficient involvement, to employ them more efficaciously, both for the individual or the organizations, whether in a business world or legal world or in sports or academia. The research statement of my study was servant leadership style is more compatible with female leadership consultants to train and develop their followers, organizational behaviors, and leadership styles, because it studies in such a manner that coincides with my study and my topic of my research. And in this way it was easier for me to analyze whether the point I'm looking for, whether it has changed or how much it has deviated over time, and what are the uh, basic complications they're still facing, how they are differentiating between the precedents that has been set over time, that has happened over time, or we can overcome those lags and move forward. So to analyze those factors, the hypothesis I have uh, built, it was there is a significant difference towards perception of servant leadership style between male and female leadership consultants, and a servant leadership style is likely to display more gender neutrality. Women consultants are more compatible with this style because naturally they have been uh, less favored to be more successful in a in a competitive world, and where gender has been played a significant role in uh, identifying and portraying the leaders of our society. I mean, it's not very prevalent or very it hasn't been seen so much often that a lot of leaders of the nations around the world are female leaders. Even a decade ago, it was just a handful, like two or three in total. As one of the leaders, one of among them was from my country, but it wasn't very often. I mean, even in the members of the parliament in our country, although the leader of our nation was the leader, as a female leader, but the member of our parliament or other administrative wings, the leaders were still mostly men, mostly male dominated, but it has changed over time and it has been improving over time. Women has been more involved in from being an part of the community to the part of the administration and all over. So my hypothesis for this study clearly connects with the servant leadership style, and it was very clear to understand and analyze. First, the service leadership study was originated in the writings of Greenleaf. I found that in the book, and the main concept is true leadership is an act of service towards the ones that follow the leader. Like other contemporary leadership theories, servant leadership also focuses on the needs of the followers. It emphasizes on how the leader should treat the followers and nurture them. As I said already, how they are trained themselves to lead their followers, and also how they train their followers so that their followers can move forward and be leaders in the future. Servant leaders are expected to put their followers first, and by empowering them, they are expected to help them to reach their highest potential possibilities. leadership review. I'm sorry. Uh, there are 10 characteristics of the servant leadership I have uh, discussed in my analysis. These are listening, empathy, healing, awareness, persuasion, conceptualization, foresight, stewardship, commitment to the growth of people, and building community. Although a lot of them are connected, like suppose if the leader is a good listener, he has a greater chance of being empathetic to his followers and to acknowledge their pain and their hardship they're facing so that he can uh, conceptualize that how they're being suffered under these problems, and he can also be these factors can also be a primordial tool in overcoming their problems by stewardship from the leader. So in a multiple angle, these are all connected to one another, and they help to build a commitment between the leader and the followers, and also to serve them as ideal role models. Model of servant leadership. Well, the antecedent conditions, servant leader behaviors and outcomes, they're like the basis of the structure of my research. There were three basis conditions: the context and culture, wherever they're coming from, wherever they are serving, or wherever they are about going to serve. Leader attributes, how they have helped or have been successful in building the behaviors and their um, ideological principles. Then finally, follower receptivity, how the followers have been able to follow those and grow. And on the next process, the servant leadership behaviors, it was more from the 10 ideal factors: conceptualizing, emotional healing, putting followers first, helping followers grow and succeed by helping themselves, behaving ethically, empowering, creating value for the community. And the outcomes that has been derived from all these steps following through will be follow performance and growth, organizational performance overall, because if individuals are growing, then it helps to grow the organization as a whole in a societal development impact. Gendered leadership. Leaders are often expected to portray masculine traits, whether they're aggressive, they portray dominance or persuasiveness, how effectively they can improve and enable their followers. The social stereotypes of how a leader should act or lead are often influenced by the think leader, think paradigm. But as the servant leadership relies on the trust and commitment bestowed upon them by their followers based on their service, these gendered stereotypes and norms are expected to have zero or no influence. Although they still don't portray that kind of results for now, but they're expected to improve and show this level of influence in the future. Gender bias in leadership, communal leadership. I have followed the examination of Mary Hogue. Objectives were like the existence of difference between men and women leadership styles by inducing more feminine qualities into leadership, disadvantaging leader gender bias should be eliminated, and this impact can be observed in servant leadership. Surveying design done on 201 working college 201 working college students in Midwest USA. She has used the methodology. Each of them were presented with a male and female leader with same attributes and were asked for future expectations from the leader. Their findings was expectations for servant leader behavior were greater for the female leaders than the male, and expectation for authoritarian behavior was greater for male leaders than female. Limitations: sample included only working students from Midwest, and important variables such as self-efficacy and changing concepts of gender bias was not included in the study. Although I do think that the changing concept of gender bias should have been included in the study, but I guess it is understandable that uh, it would not have made a huge difference based on the contemporary acknowledgement and understanding of the leadership theories. Performance management coaching, servant leadership, and gender implications by Angus J. Dove. His study was a little bit different than the earlier one, than Mary Hogue. It integrated with past scholarships, like how the theory has evolved or has been more effective in performance management coaching or individual analysis or approaches. And it implies that based on the past scholarship, women are more socialized than men. Servant leadership reduces the disadvantages of female leadership, and female managers are more successful than when it comes to team coaching for performance management. Examination of the relation between servant leadership and agency problems by D. Politis and Dennis J. Politis. The objective was to analyze and observe differences between servant leadership and agency problems and how gender plays a role in this relationship. The design was to analyze 276 full-time employees from two financial institutions in Cyprus. Factor analysis was performed for the methodology to capture the underlying factors and investigate in the studies. And the finding was that female managers has a strong leadership on constructs of agency problems, which eventually lead to reduction of agency problems in financial institutions. Although it has been found that a lot of followers feels female managers portray servant leadership traits more than male managers, even they do not exhibit them explicitly. The literature gap of my research was the whole of this literature was focused on gender stereotypes and leadership style differences. Almost none of the research was conducted to see if the differences existed or there are other factors influence their style. And to be honest, I felt that it was a bit much biased in that term, because it focused a lot on stereotypes and gender leadership differences. Researchers show that women leaders, if they adopt certain leadership style, has the most potential to success in performance management than their male counterparts, and there was no empirical evidence done on that. It was a huge gap as well. We should have studied on focused on those two issues even more. And the methodology I have used to analyze was based on 56 professional leadership consultants, out of which 28 were men and other 28 were women. It was more like a qualitative analysis. They have been in this industry for 5 years, all of the participants, and anonymity was maintained throughout the study. Finally, I came to the findings of my research, and well, as I've already discussed that there were some gaps, but still the findings were very eye-opening for me for the whole um, theory analysis for the topic I was discussing. There were no significant differences when it comes to adopting different approaches to train and improve leadership styles, either by the male or the female consultants. And it was interesting to see that female leadership consultants are more specific of their expectations from their mentees or followers. That to some extent there has been more invested and more efficacious in their objectives to reach their goals. And finally, I made the recommendation for future research implication from my study that female leadership consultants are more inclined towards developing interpersonal skills. Further research might approve the assumption that women are more successful if they adopt servant leadership style. I guess it would be a really interesting point to research that part and to effectively invest in that issue that women are more successful than their male counterparts if they adopt servant leadership style. And here are my references. I have used a great deal of input from the book of our coursework and a couple of other journal articles which helped me a lot. Thank you so much.